I almost threw the key away because I thought it belonged to one of Mom's old filing cabinets. Daniel and I had been going through the last few boxes from her house for almost 3 hours, and by then everything had started to look the same. Old receipts, appliance manuals, birthday cards she couldn't bring herself to throw away. The key was at the bottom of a small wooden box from her bedroom closet. It was an ordinary brass house key with a white plastic tag attached to it. I turned it over. My name was written on the front. Claire. On the back was an address I didn't recognize. 14 Cedar Hollow Road. Daniel. He was sitting on the floor across from me with a stack of bank statements in his lap. What? I held up the key. Do you know this address? He glanced at it, then looked again. He didn't say anything, but he stopped sorting papers. You do. I know the street. How? I've driven Mom there. I sat up straighter. Recently? Yeah, a few times in the last couple of years. Who lives there? A woman named Ruth. Ruth called her. What did Mom say about her? Just that she was an old friend. Mom had been 71 when she died 3 weeks earlier. She'd worked in payroll for most of her adult life, and even after she retired, she still treated paperwork like something that might one day be called as a witness. She labeled drawers. She wrote dates on the backs of photographs. She kept things organized long after there was any practical reason to. If she'd put my name on a key, I didn't believe she'd done it by accident. Did you ever go inside? No. Did Mom? Yes. Daniel thought for a second. One time her car was in the shop and she asked me to take her. When we got there, she opened the door herself. With a key? Yes. Was Ruth home? I think so. Ruth had some kind of surgery. Mom was helping her out. I looked at the key again. So this wasn't something from 40 years ago that Mom had forgotten in a drawer. She had been using it recently. That evening I looked up the address. Ruth Calder was 75 and had lived at 14 Cedar Hollow Road for decades. There was nothing remarkable about her that I could find. No obvious connection to my family. No business tied to Mom's name. Nothing that explained why my mother had a key to her house. She seemed to be exactly what Daniel had said. An older woman, Mom knew. That should have made the key less interesting. Instead, it made the label harder to explain. Mom hadn't written Ruth. She hadn't written Cedar Hollow. She had written Claire. The next morning, I called Daniel. I'm going there. There was a pause. Maybe call first. I don't have her number. Then maybe that's a sign. Or maybe Mom putting my name on the key was the sign. Just don't walk into somebody's house. I won't. That was the plan. 14 Cedar Hollow Road was about 35 minutes from the house where we'd grown up. It was a small one-story home on a quiet street. Pale siding, dark green shutters, a maple tree near the driveway. Nothing about it looked like the setting of a secret. I knocked. No answer. I waited and knocked again. Still nothing. I almost left. Then I took the key out of my pocket. For a few seconds, I just stood there looking at my own name. I told myself I was only checking whether it fit. I slid the key into the lock. It turned. The click was tiny. I stood there with my hand on the knob. The key worked. Now, I pushed the door open a few inches. Hello? Nothing. Ruth? No answer. I opened it far enough to look inside. I wasn't going to search the house. I wasn't even sure I was going to step through the doorway. Then I saw the book. It was sitting on a low shelf across from the entrance. Faded yellow cover, red cloth along the spine, a rabbit under a blue moon. I knew I'd seen it before. Not in memory. In a photograph. Mom had kept an old picture in the hallway of our childhood home. I was about 3, sitting on Dad's lap with a yellow book open across my knees. I stepped inside. The book was old enough that the corners had gone soft. I opened it. Inside the front cover, in my mother's handwriting, were 2 words. Claire M. Underneath was a blue scribble made by a child. I was still staring at it when I heard a car door outside. An older woman was walking up the driveway carrying a paper grocery bag. She saw the open door. Then she saw me. Then the book in my hands. She stopped. I put it back immediately. I'm sorry, I knocked. Nobody answered. I shouldn't have come in. Her eyes moved to the key. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she said Helen shouldn't have done that. I looked at the key. You knew she'd give it to me? No. Then how do you know she did? The woman came up the steps and set the grocery bag on a bench. Because you're standing in my house holding her key. She looked at me carefully. And because you're Claire. Something inside me tightened. You know who I am? Yes. Have we met? A long time ago. How long? She looked past me toward the shelf. Come inside. I'm already inside. For the first time, the corner of her mouth moved. Barely. She closed the door behind us. I'm Ruth, I figured. She offered coffee. I said no. She made 2 cups anyway. I stayed standing. Why do you have that book? Because it was yours. Why was something of mine here? Ruth sat at the kitchen table. You really don't remember me. It wasn't a question. No. She nodded like she'd expected that. How did you know my parents? Your mother and I worked in the same building years ago. She was doing bookkeeping. I worked in medical records. And Dad? I knew David through Helen. I sat across from her. Did Mom come here recently? Yes. How recently? Ruth looked into her coffee. About 2 weeks before she died. I stared at her. Mom had been in this kitchen 2 weeks before she died. She had never mentioned Ruth. What did she want? That day, coffee. That's it? That's it. Why did she have your key? I gave it to her after I had surgery last year. She helped me for a while, checked the house, picked up groceries, things like that. So you were close. Sometimes. Then why have I never heard your name? Ruth didn't answer. I looked toward the living room. How do you know me? She studied me for a moment. You used to hide peas under mashed potatoes and flatten them down so your mother wouldn't see. I almost smiled. Every kid hates peas. You also wouldn't sleep unless the hallway light stayed on. If somebody turned it off after you fell asleep, you'd wake up yelling. The smile disappeared. Mom told you that? No. Then how do you know? Ruth looked toward the book. I understood before she answered. Was I here? Yes. In this house? Yes. I looked around again. The kitchen. The hallway. The worn wooden floor. Nothing came back to me. Why? Ruth folded her hands. You were very young. That's not why. No. How long was I here? She hesitated. For a while. That answer made me angrier than if she'd refused. I'm going to ask you something once. If this has something to do with my childhood, I don't want to be protected from it anymore. Ruth looked at me. Did Helen ever say anything to Daniel about me? I frowned. Not that I know of. Ask him. I called Daniel from Ruth's driveway. He answered almost immediately. Well, Ruth knows me. There was silence. Knows you how? From when I was little. Did Mom ever say anything else about her? I told you, she said they were old friends. Think. Daniel exhaled. One time I asked why Mom kept going over there. It was after Dad died. Ruth's name had come up a few times. What did Mom say? He paused. She said there are things people give you that you can't give back. I looked at Ruth's front door. Anything else? I think she said all you can do is remember. My stomach turned. Daniel, were either of us adopted? What? Were we? No. Do you know that? Claire, we have birth certificates. Pictures of Mom pregnant with you. What are you talking about? Ruth has one of my old books. She remembers me as a kid. She says I've been inside her house. Daniel went quiet. You were born 4 years after me, I said. If something happened before you were born, you wouldn't know. Neither would you, apparently. I ended the call and went back inside. The coffee Ruth had made for me was still untouched. I sat down. You're not related to me. No. Not Mom's sister, not Dad's relative. No. You're not my biological mother. No. The answer came without hesitation. I hated that part of me had been relieved. So what were you? Ruth looked at me. For a while I was the person who took care of you when your mother couldn't be there. A babysitter? Sometimes. For how long? She hesitated. Most of a year. I thought I'd misheard. Most of a year? You were 3. Did I live here? You slept here sometimes. How often? Enough that I kept pajamas for you. I stared toward the hallway. Why would my mother need someone else to keep pajamas for me? Because she was trying to hold your family together. That stopped me. Ruth didn't wait for another question. Your father was doing field service work then, and there were stretches when he was gone most of the week. Helen had finally gotten a full-time payroll job with benefits. She was terrified she'd lose it. The childcare arrangement she'd made fell apart almost as soon as she started. So you helped? For what was supposed to be a few weeks. But it became almost a year. Yes. Why? Ruth looked toward the window. Because I was supposed to leave. Leave where? I'd been offered a supervisor position in medical records at a hospital a few hours north. Better pay, more responsibility. I was planning to move. What happened? Your mother's childcare fell through right before my start date. Did she ask you to stay? No. You decided to? I asked the hospital if they'd delay my start.
Did they?
For a little while. And then they couldn't keep the position open. They gave it to someone else. Yes? I sat back. Mom knew? Yes. And you still kept watching me? For several more months. I stood. Ruth, that's not helping somebody for a couple of weeks. No. She let you give up a job. Ruth's voice hardened. Your mother did not make that decision for me. She needed you. And I chose to stay. Because if you left, she might have lost her job. Maybe. Which means our family stayed stable because you stayed. Partly. That's a pretty big part. Ruth looked directly at me. Don't turn one decision I made into the explanation for your entire childhood. I stopped. Your parents worked. Your father came home. Your mother kept that job because she was good at it. Eventually, they found reliable childcare. They did the rest. But you lost the position. Yes. Did you ever get another supervisor job? Years later. So what did you actually lose? Ruth thought about it. A possibility. I sat down again. Maybe I would have loved that city. Maybe I would have hated it. Maybe I would have stayed for years. I don't know. Did you regret staying? Sometimes. The answer hurt more because she didn't soften it. Then she said, I never regretted you. I looked at her. Did you love me? Ruth seemed surprised. Then she nodded. Yes. When I was 3. When you were 3? Then why did you disappear? Because eventually your mother didn't need me anymore. Your father was home more. You had your own family, your own routine. You still could have known me. I could have.
Why didn't you?
Ruth looked down at her hands. I thought leaving was cleaner.
For who?
For everyone. Was it? For me? No. For me? She looked back at me. You grew up. That doesn't answer the question. No. I thought if you grew up happy, maybe stepping away had been the right thing. I didn't know what to do with that. A woman I had never heard of had loved me. Then she deliberately stepped out of my life because she thought that was the kindest thing she could do. Mom felt guilty. Yes. For the job. For a lot of things. So she spent 40 years trying to repay you. No. She helped you. She came here. She had your key. Because we were friends, Claire. Was any of it repayment? Ruth shook her head. Your mother could carry guilt farther than most people could carry groceries. Despite myself, I laughed. That sounded exactly like Helen. Ruth's expression softened. We weren't close every year. Sometimes it was a Christmas card, a phone call, lunch once in a while, then we'd go quiet again. What changed recently? Your father died. 8 years earlier. Mom got lonely. So did I in different ways. We started seeing each other more. And Dad knew about you? He knew I'd taken care of you. He knew I existed. Then why didn't he tell me? I don't think your father thought there was a secret to tell. To him, I was someone who helped during a difficult year. Then life moved on. But Mom didn't completely move on. No. Neither did you. No. I stared at her. So somebody chose not to tell me. Yes. You. At first. And Mom agreed. Yes. Why? Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Because I didn't want to become a story your mother used to teach you gratitude. I frowned. What does that mean? It means I didn't want you growing up hearing that some woman you'd barely remember lost an opportunity because she stayed and helped your mother. I didn't want every good thing in your life to come with a footnote telling you to be grateful. But it happened. Part of it happened. That's convenient. No, it's precise. She leaned toward me. What I did was my choice. And my childhood? Ruth stopped. That was yours. Then why wasn't I allowed to know it? For the first time, she didn't have an answer ready. I don't know if we got that part right. The room went quiet. That changed the question for me. I had been trying to decide who had been wrong. Now Ruth was telling me she wasn't sure the answer was that simple. I took the key out of my pocket and set it between us. Oh, why did Mom have this one? I gave it to her after my surgery last year. So it's recent. Yes. You never saw the tag? Ruth shook her head. I turned it so my name faced her. Claire. Ruth stared at it. She did that on purpose. Obviously. No. She looked at me. I mean, she had been thinking about this. What makes you say that? A few months ago, she started bringing you up. What did she say? Ruth already looked irritated. She said maybe we'd mixed up two things, keeping you from feeling responsible for my choices and keeping you from knowing I'd been part of your childhood. That sounded more like Mom than the version I'd been building in my head. Practical. Late. Certain once she'd finally made up her mind. What did you say? I told her I still didn't want to be dropped into your life as somebody you were supposed to repay. And she gave me the key anyway. Apparently. Are you angry? Yes. At me? No. At her? Yes. I wasn't prepared for that. Part of me had been waiting for Ruth to tell me Mom had found the perfect solution before she died. Instead, Ruth looked at the key like Helen had crossed a line. She had no right to give that to you. My anger came back just as quickly. And she had no right to keep part of my childhood from me for 40 years. Ruth didn't argue. Those aren't the same questions, she said. Maybe not, but they're connected. Yes. So what was she supposed to do? Ruth looked at me. I don't know. That answer mattered more than I expected. Because there wasn't a letter waiting for me. No recording. No neat explanation telling me what Helen wanted me to think about Ruth. She hadn't told Ruth what she was planning. She had left me a key with my name on it. She had made sure I could get to the door. I cried then. My mother was dead, my father was gone, and a woman I'd met that morning could remember how I slept when I was 3. Ruth handed me a tissue. She didn't touch me. After a while, I asked about Dad's old brown station wagon. Ruth laughed. That thing was horrible. He loved it. He defended it like it had feelings. We talked for a few minutes about ordinary things, Dad's car, Mom's habit of organizing coupons by expiration date. By then, there wasn't much left for me to discover. What I still didn't know was what Ruth and I were supposed to do with each other. When I stood to leave, the key was still on the table. Ruth picked it up and held it toward me. I shook my head. It was yours before it was Mom's. She left it for you. She left me a way to find you. Ruth looked at me. That's not the same as giving you my house key. She lowered her hand. I put on my coat. Do you want me to come back? Ruth took her time. I don't want you coming back because you think you're supposed to. I know. Do you? I looked at the key. I don't know yet. That was the most honest answer I had. So I left it with her. Over the next few days, I stopped thinking about Ruth as something my mother had failed to repay. I started thinking about her as a person. I was still angry with Mom for deciding what I was allowed to know. I also understood why she'd been afraid that truth could turn into obligation. Both things were true. On the 5th afternoon, I drove back to Cedar Hollow Road. I parked in the same place and walked up the same steps. This time I didn't have a key. I knocked. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the door opened. Ruth looked at me. I'd spent the entire drive trying to decide what to say. In the end, I used the only sentence that didn't feel like a promise. Is this a bad time? Ruth looked behind her, then back at me. No. She opened the door wider. The first time I entered Ruth Calder's house, I used a key my mother had left behind. The second time, Ruth opened the door herself. This time we both got to choose. Do you think Helen had the right to leave Claire that key even after Ruth asked her not to? Or did Claire have the right to know that part of her own childhood? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if stories like this stay with you after they're over, subscribe. There's another one waiting for you.